So this is the panel now on Islamic social finance, customer expectations and the role of non-banking institutions providing ethically and socially aligned solutions. So taking the discussion from banks, a lot of the criticism we hear is with regards to banking, and we've heard why, perhaps because of the field in which they operate. So how much of an onus is outside of banking to provide some of these solutions? So we've got a very diverse panel, which is very good, different experiences, different understandings, different approaches. And so before we start, I just want each of them to talk a little bit about themselves, what they do, and kind of their motivations for the area that they're in. So I guess we'll start right at the end, Daniel. Yeah, if you can introduce yourself and your background, please.
Okay, I've also just noticed my picture, which I think I was wearing exactly the same outfit when I had that taken. So I'm feeling myself, at least I've been consistent. It's my one outfit. Yes, so sorry, I'm Dan Saunders. I'm from Octopus. I don't know if people have come across Octopus in this room, but we're basically known for two things. We're first a alternative investment manager. So we manage roughly about £8 billion of assets in the UK and across Europe, with a big focus on sustainability, especially renewable energy generation, which also included setting up a energy supply business in 2016, which is Octopus Energy, fully renewable energy supply. My focus, though, is on clean transportation and helping the UK and other nations try and shift to zero emission transport. And as part of that and a happy coincidence, we've been looking at how to build in a wider set of sustainability goals, including Islamic finance, and that's really driven what we're doing today.
Excellent, thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Dr. Said.
Assalamu alaikum. I am Bouheraoua. I am from ISRA, International Sharia Research Academy for Islamic Finance. I am Director of Research, Development and Innovation, where our bread and butter is doing research related to banking and non-banking sector. And we are doing also consultancy. Our major customers is Islamic Development Bank, and we are partnering with Deloitte and World Bank and other big institutions.
Thank you.
To me, I will also make a comment on my photo. It's 3 years old one. So I haven't changed much since. Emir, I am a lecturer at the Markville Institute of Higher Education. Penny Appeal opened the Centre for Islamic Sustainable Development last year, and it's operating and recruiting students. We have a number of courses at the Markville. We have undergraduate and postgraduate courses. I'm also associated with Bolton University as a PhD supervisor, so pretty much in academic work.
Excellent, thank you. Ali Akbar.
Well, I also feel obliged to comment on my uniform or dress. So Daniel, don't feel so bad. And it's interesting to sit in this sort of panel and the whole conference, because I'm not of an economic background, not of a finance background, not an accountant. I'm actually an optician. So I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, I'll be able to help for you all to see the wider picture and far into the future. And I'm involved in community-based initiatives and banking. And when I say banking, not the conventional banking again, is for helping people in distress from debt and who need just a little hand to help them get themselves back onto their feet. So it's small lending, interest-free lending, and where we've been struggling is one, to make it obvious that it's needed help is needed, because people are saying, well, you have a social security program here, so there should be no need for this. And the second thing is sort of problems with compliance, and structures aren't allowing us to set up things on a community level at a small level. So that's where my involvement is at the moment.
So I'll start with you, anyway, actually. So Ansar Finance, who Ali Akbar is the CEO of, they provide, as he said, interest-free lending for the most impoverished in society, those who are in quite dire circumstances with regards to debt. You would probably call this a microfinancing arrangement globally. Microfinancing has had phenomenal success globally, if you look at it. But the challenge has been to do it in a non-interest model. I know internationally, for example, Akhuwat in Pakistan does it without interest. In the UK, is it feasible to have such a structure and take on the payday lenders, do you think? You mentioned some of the barriers that you've had. Why has it been harder? What have been the challenges in establishing the model in the UK? You'd think to help people would be quite straightforward.
Well, when we first started, actually it was a personal decision that I needed to buy into a business, and there was nothing available around in terms of business financing on an interest-free basis. And when we talked about it, people wanted a certain level of return, and it's got a guaranteed return. So that spurred me on to sort of think about, well, can we do something in a small way? And then another friend of mine came along and he said, look, somebody owes me money, he's not paying it back. Can you, not beat him up, but can you talk to him and let's do something about this? So that spurred me on to say, look, if I'm, and by the way, a relative of mine, he stopped speaking to me because I had the audacity to ask back for a loan I'd given him. So we needed to set something up. And there were enough people, friends, who were in similar situations. So we started to pool monies together, and from that pooling, the people could take an interest-free loan. And we realized, hold on, this was happening all over the country. So people needed help, and this is where it all came about. But what one of the barriers was, we had to be careful, is this deposit taking? And that brings in other angles. And then the second thing is, consumer credit lending, legal agreements, compliancy, and this is all when the lending we give is not making any money whatsoever. So this is a huge issue. But alhamdulillah, we've been operating for 25 years now.
Wow, that's a lot longer than some of the banks that have been operating for profit, so yeah, brilliant. And we'll come back to this point actually about how the rest of the sector can help. Dr. Emir, a question for yourself actually. You did a research paper on intangible assets of the Islamic finance institutions, is that correct? How are you qualifying those intangible assets? What were you referring to with regards to it? Because we're looking now at beyond a return, beyond just profit.
One of the most powerful, I can say, intangible assets of a financial institution would be its reputation. So now, I tackle the issue of reputation and risks that are surrounding the area of reputation of Islamic financial institution. It is mainly around the customer, and I think the previous panels were also about the customer focused. So it's about customers' beliefs, expectations, and opinions in regards to a certain financial product. We have an issue here in the UK that Islamic banking and finance are a very niche market. Most of the population is very small, and out of the population of Muslims, what is the percentage of individuals who are bankable? And then out of that, what is the percentage of people who actually believe in the notion of Islamic banking and finance? Very small,
right,
unfortunately. But now it's more about the role of how it would be maybe one of your next questions about the impact of non-financial sector in Islamic economy. So,
Yeah, so I'll take it from you actually to move on, because it's quite interesting that you also, Penny Appeal, which is a charity, and your background in Islamic finance, they've set up this institution. What was the kind of motivations for that, and how do they see their role within the Islamic finance industry?
Actually, Penny Appeal opened a centre at Markfield 2 years ago with the aim of having their actions, activities underpinned by research. So when we talk about the role of non-profits in Islamic economy, what first comes to our mind is the charity and charitable sector and the impact it can make on the economy. The term Islamic social finance not long ago emerged into the literature of Islamic banking and finance. It's all about the social equilibrium, economic justice, inclusive participation that are derived from the maqasid al-sharia or higher objectives of Islamic law that are then transferred through the means of zakah, waqf, and Islamic microfinance, as Brother Ali Akbar mentioned, as a very, very powerful tool for poverty alleviation, for example. Zakah, just last year in the UK, Muslims gave out approximately 300 million pounds in zakat only, and Islamic Development Bank estimates with 1.7 billion Muslims globally, zakat pool of $1 trillion, which is huge amount. Now the question is now even in academia, like how to effectively utilize all that fund. And definitely that comes from the research.
Excellent.
The research in the area.
Thank you. Dr. Said, so from your background, what would you say are the challenges and opportunities in establishing or re-establishing a waqf culture? Seems to have been lost. Might be good to kind of give a background to waqf and then talk about its role, and is it feasible today in having a waqf?
Okay, thank you very much. You have mentioned before that the non-banking sector has to play a role in this time, because as discussed in the morning, that the banking sector, especially Islamic banking sector, has with the experience of these 30-40 years, it has shown that it did not clearly demark from the conventional banking because of some constraint. Sometimes it's not to be blamed, but the system itself did not help the Islamic banking to move comfortably towards the risk-sharing perspective, because it's unfair to ask the customer to apply for risk-sharing. He will risk all his capital, but at the end the rate of return is the same. It's even from the equitable perspective, it's unfair to do it to the customer. That's why you will find many banks that they are moving away from the musharaka, the mudaraba, towards tawarruq. Unfortunately, because of the ecosystem that they are governing Islamic finance. That's why the alternative is either, of course, we will strive to do some adjustments within the existing banking system, but there are huge opportunities to the non-banking system from Islamic perspective, the Qard Hassan, and as you mentioned, the Waqf. Now we have, ISRA has done an extensive research on the potential of Waqf, and we realized that we were discussing the 1 trillion assets of Waqf. This is all, most of them, they are physical assets. But because of the evolvement of the discussion of cash Waqf, which became prevalent before, there was a huge argument among scholars whether cash Waqf is Sharia compliant or eligible or not. Of course, the only madhab school of law that they supported the cash Waqf is the Maliki and the late Hanafi. But now it's a prevailing Sharia opinion from IOFI, from Fiqh Academy, that cash Waqf is something Sharia compliant. Now, if you add to this 1 trillion asset, the cash Waqf, and there was a study saying that the housewife in Saudi Arabia alone, they have around 80 billion riyal in cash, which is around 20 billion USD. And we have done research for IDB, and we are doing consultation for IDB to issue cash Waqf sukuk either temporary or permanent cash waqf. And we did even present to them that those housewives, if we will tell them that if you contribute part of your cash waqf to this, your deposit saving into cash waqf, you will not need to pay the 2.5% zakat. So which means the least that they will gain at the end of the year is 2.5% profit. But now those are the opportunities. There is huge, since there is now no issue among scholars about the cash waqf as a mean of financing, and we have conducted recently with World Bank and NCF a roundtable that has ended with an excellent report. I advise you to read the report. We realized that it can compete. Now the banking sector, it has 2 trillion. Now you can speak about the waqf sector, which is non-banking, it will have more than 2 trillion. And it's, to some extent, it has the religious motivation and the economic motivation. Those are the potentiality. Now the challenges is, first of all, the mindset of people that are still stick to the permanent, to immovable assets. Second, the issue of governance. Because people, they are willing, we have done a study, they are willing to contribute in cash waqf, either sukuk or fund or whatever it is, but they need to see clear transparency and disclosure and also the governance. That's why the legislation in terms of waqf, it has to be robust, Sharia governance has to be sound to give a comfort to the participant. Plus, Malaysia, they are leading in terms of collaborating with private sectors, because the issue in many countries, waqf is governed by the government and they don't have professionals. But in Malaysia, the tower of Bank Islam, which is based on waqf land, it's a collaboration between private and religious organization. It was a successful project of 152 million, which is around 50 million USD. So the governance, the usage of latest technology. Now with some companies, we are collaborating in having blockchain of waqf distribution and collection. We have also preparing a blockchain of waqf, also, of zakat and waqf. Those are all the challenges that we need to meet. And I can say that with the awareness, with the religious motivation, with the governance, with the professional approach of this waqf, it's a huge potential to assist, especially the microfinancing. Yeah. Without losing the capital. So the issue with our brother is that they are using the whole capital. But the waqf that we are proposing is that you maintain the capital, but you just use the proceeds, the income, for the development of those vital areas.
Thank you. Just to confirm, what was that figure for Saudi housewives? How much money they had?
In fact, I have reduced the amount. They mentioned about 100 billion USD in the savings. Now I put it as some reservation to put it into 80. But it's more than this one. This is just in one country.
Wow.
So this is huge.
Good. If ever there was a reason to go visit Saudi, I think you've just given it to everyone. Okay, so Dan, Milton Friedman famously said that there is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. So how do you challenge that in terms of social responsibility and the work you're doing promoting clean fuel?
Cool, that's a question. Well, I think I'm going to disagree with Milton. Look, I think the world's very different now to what it was maybe 50, certainly 100 years ago. Stakeholders, and by stakeholders I mean investors, I mean customers, I mean society in general, expect a change. They expect companies to act responsibly. It's not about just making money anymore. It can't be, because we've seen what short-termism does. And I think as society becomes more and more educated in the benefits of sharing the outputs of companies and reinvesting them in the long term, so that it filters down and so it closes out inequalities among society, I think we're all starting to realise the benefits. So in the last 5 years, you've seen some big corporations stand up and say, right, we're going to make a difference here. We're going to start reinvesting some of our profits to do good. And my colleagues from CIMB and Gatehouse earlier said, you can see straight away that there is a change coming about now. So, I'm from what is effectively a very small alternative investment company, Octopus, but I think we're one of many, and I can see this becoming more and more the norm. And it's not purely altruistic. There's a very valid commercial reason why companies are starting to behave this way, because for the long-term success of that company, it's good to reinvest profits and it's good to reinvest time in society. So you can see that the alignment of interest is only growing, and I think it's something to be applauded, if I'm honest.
Excellent. Just for everyone's information, actually, because we had a lot of discussions about banks being the right vehicles, and excuse the pun, but one of the projects that Daniel actually spearheaded was Sharia compliant financing for black taxis, which are part of London's iconography, that they're clean fuel, and you can purchase one with Sharia compliant financing. What was actually quite different about it was the structure that was used was very innovative. It was a profit share per mile. So for taxi drivers, they will purchase, they cost between 90 and 100,000 pounds, which is obviously quite a lot of money. But per mile, they would share the profit with Octopus. So sometimes when you're not in an industry, you can look at problems from a different angle. And I guess as part of the relooking at Islamic finance, the reimagining of Islamic finance, it's to try and think, well, what other structures and opportunities are available? Dr. Said, you spoke about using blockchain for waqf and transparency as well. And I guess the question I want to ask Dr. Emir now is that what role do you think technology is going to play in utilising, finance and cash outside of banking to be used in a charitable way?
I'm not particularly sure about the technology. Definitely large. I'm not so much into FinTech, but the FinTech is emerging into the industry of Islamic banking and finance. I would more like to kind of reflect on the opportunities and the potential for that waqf-based financing. With those laws and regulations, they cannot alone guarantee the effective revival of the waqf institution of waqf. The much softer kind of element is required to ensure the long-term sustainability of waqf institution, and by that I mean the trust.
Yeah.
The trust can be only established through the actions of responsible individuals and the financial institutions collectively. So more needs to be done through public awareness, speeches, to encourage donors and all stakeholders in the ecosystem of the waqf to ensure its sustainability. We talked about Islamic social finance, and this is being recognized also globally. Now we need to find the ways to unlock its full potential, and this is being done through the research, I believe.
Excellent. That's actually been quite a consistent theme today around education, and I guess also re-education in terms of understanding things from a different perspective, different paradigms, looking at how to achieve the social outcomes we need. If you go from an outcomes basis, what are the different ways to achieve those outcomes, as opposed to here are the vehicles we have and this is what we're going to achieve with it. So I think that makes absolute sense. I guess, Ali Akbar, right, for yourself, in terms of you've been around for 25 years, what have you noticed in terms of trends from when you started to now, in terms of the need or how people have responded? And I guess, we're very charitable. We're part of the Muslim community in the UK. We've had amazing figures in terms of what they give. But when it comes to giving money to help people in financial distress, there always seems to be a bit of hesitancy. Has this been your experience?
It has, as we've been saying, there's plenty of zakatable giving, and for disasters, emergency relief, there's plenty of giving, and the Muslim community is very, very far ahead of most people, most communities. When it comes to helping somebody with a personal loan, it's quite another matter. Especially, I've only got experience in UK, and living here, people think, well, they get benefits, so they shouldn't be in that position. One thing to make people realize really is that it wasn't only people in poverty that we're talking about. It's people in decent incomes, but their expenses, for whatever reason, are not sustainable. So there's a lot of education about how people are living. And also, they come into a problem where they need just a loan because some emergency situations cropped up. So we are not only giving to people on the poverty line, we're giving to people who, we've given to GPs. We've given to other people who are in good professional professions. And sometimes they just need £5,000, £1,000 at that time. And they go nowhere to, they don't want to, for whatever reason, they don't want to go to their relatives, their friends, of the issues that have cropped up before. So we find, but nobody's willing to give for that reason. And they're saying, well, there's too many other issues that we need to give our donation or zakat to. So they won't give it to somebody like Ansar Finance. So we have an issue tapping into that. But where the banks can help is their corporate social responsibility, where businesses can help on the same way corporate social responsibility can do that. So this is what we're asking. And the small hundreds of people who are giving into Ansar Finance, they're able to help thousands of people. So if you can multiply that around the country by 20 times, 50 times, it'll have a huge social impact. And those people won't get into interest-based debt and get themselves into more trouble rather than less trouble.
Yeah, we heard actually earlier about some of the figures. There was research done on the levels of depression and mental illness that arises from debt, from the small pockets of debt. We've seen the rise of food banks and the need for people to have them in a society like ours. So I can definitely appreciate that there is...
Well, from a legal point of view, if whoever's talking to governments, if they can make it possible that small communities are willing to do things, as long as there are not too many barriers there, too many costs involved.
Yeah. Okay. No, appreciate that point. I'm going to open the floor now. Open the floor to questions. I'll start with yourself.
Thank you. This is a question for Ali. I should really be calling you Uncle Ali for respect. What you're doing at Ansar sounds amazing. What is restricting you from rolling out this concept, which is, I guess, a Manchester-based Northwest England concept, to the rest of England and to the rest of the UK? It sounds like you have, or I guess you've put into practice the Islamic answer to money shortages and loans. How can you roll that out to the rest of the UK?
As I stated earlier, we start with just a few friends getting together and discussing the issue. So there's a lot of trust within the founding members and the trustees. And when we exhausted our friends and relatives to be part of this initiative, others were saying, well, how can we trust these people? And we registered as a company by guarantee, we registered as a charity, we're with the Financial Conduct Authority, but they still say, how can we trust these people with donations to give it out to the right sort of people, to where it's needed? So trust is a big issue. So that's why it's restricted. That's why I don't feel we can possibly roll it out too far and wide. It needs smaller groups to take the model and develop it like that into different parts of the country.
Iqbal, why?
I'd just like to add on Professor Dr. Said's comment on Saudi women. I had 3 Saudi students, women students at the business school. And over the year, we came across a lot of discussions and detail. I think 80 billion is nothing. If you imagine that one of the things which no Saudi government can change is that women are entitled to inherit. So they inherit a certain proportion of the wealth. What happens is that because they don't have financial expertise, that money is taken over by cousins and nephews and brothers and so on and misused. So I tried to encourage them to open a finance house which advises women how to invest their inheritance. Our estimate at that time was $3 trillion. So,
So it was very conservative.
It's funny actually, the points you were making about female investors actually echoes and reflects a lot of our experience with various Islamic finance investments in the UK, that women are a lot more trusting the housewives in terms of giving them money to invest with an Islamic investment company versus, I guess, a lot of the guys who want to do those investments themselves. So there is huge pools of investment if you have the way it's structured properly, have the transparency, etc. So there are great opportunities there. Is there one more question just to finish with? Or is it just, if we can leave the Saudi housewives out of it, I don't know, you guys. All right, okay. All right, last question.
Just back to Ansar, you said you are FCA compliant, but for your type of business, which don't generate a lot of money, I suppose that was quite a cost. And is it generally the fact that the FCA compliance regime is the main barrier really in this country, because it's much higher than, say, in Canada or other countries in terms of setting up a community-based finance organization?
That's true, yeah. That's what I would say, because small groups have asked us how to set up. And one of the first things they come across is, well, what about the legal implications and the compliance costs and the fees that are needed? And so those are always an issue. So otherwise, many groups would be starting up exactly the same model that we are running at the moment.
Excellent. If I can just ask everyone, I know there's not much time left, but around a minute each maximum, just to give any closing remarks with regards to perhaps your own organisations, what you think could help you, or your own thoughts on the topic that was just discussed. Start with yourself.
Well, there's a big statement that we often try and avoid making, and that is that we need to transform the banking system.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, then there would be no need for Ansar Finance, because the banks would have arms that do Garda Hassan, interest-free lending. So that's a big ask, but in the absence of that, then we would say, well, businesses, they can do the same thing. So businesses, and thousands of Muslim businesses out there. I believe there are thousands of Muslim millionaires out there. But one thing I want to stress is that this is not just a Muslim issue.
Yeah.
You know, needing emergency help is for the whole society. And when we mention Ansar to some of my patients, when I'm testing them, I have them in the chair so I can talk to them. And when we do that, and they ask, so this is just for Muslims? And when we say, no, it's not just for Muslims, it's for anybody who's in distress. And you can apply, you can tell your friends to apply. They still don't believe me. And up to now, I haven't had one of my patients who is non-Muslim apply for a loan.
Wow.
So there seems to be some sort of issue there.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we want to know it can be big. If with a few hundred people we manage to give out millions of pounds in loans, can you imagine what 500 people in one group here, one group over there, one group in that town can do? So it's a big ask.
Thank you. Dr. Emir?
Just about the Islamic social investment, social responsibility. I think what's also important to mention that one of the categories eligible for social responsible investment project is development of Waqf assets. This should certainly help unleash the potential of Waqf mechanism, undertaking Sharia-compliant, social responsible projects of a large size. I think we should urge Islamic financial institutions and all related stakeholders to initiate and enhance the existing efforts to issue a Waqf-based, socially responsible investment sukuk to finance environmentally friendly projects. So that would be one of the
Takeaways. Thank you.
Okay.
To say.
Just to end with numbers, the United, the Global Bank, I think, World Bank with the IDB, they have estimated the collection of zakat on a yearly basis to near to 1 trillion. And they estimated the need for humanitarian aid is just 25.2 billion. You see, 1 trillion to 25.2 billion, that's all what they need in terms of humanitarian aid. Plus the Waqf, which is more than trillion, and with the religious motivation, if there is transparency and there is trust and there is professional undertaking of business, and we have engaged in 2 projects of blockchain where the transparency is crystal clear. So when there is the blockchain in terms of collection, distribution, investment, the contributors, they will see it from end to end, where they have spent and where it's invested. I think there is a huge potential to assist the non-banking system for the socially responsible financing, which is part of the maqasid al-sharia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can you?
Yeah, I'd just like to build on that point around what was just made around blockchain and particularly technology. So we're seeing more and more opportunities whereby we can look to invest and generate repayment based on actual benefits gained with the customer, so that we're very much aligned in our interests. And I think that's going to become increasingly the case over the next decade. So technology is there, it is available. And rather than, I guess, traditional finances looking for interest-bearing loans, we can look to actually have a profit or benefit sharing mechanism which technology can enable.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Tasneem. Thank you.
Thank you.